Welcome to the Casting Forward podcast, brought to you by Clubmate, the all-in-one management platform for clubs and fisheries. We'll be talking all things fish and fishing with new guests every episode from the world of angling, from fishery managers to some of the best anglers in the country, finding out what they're up to, advice for your fishery and thoughts on the future of the sport. So let's get started. Hi there guys, and welcome to the latest episode of the Casting Forward podcast with Clubmate, where we're going to strive to talk about the big things in angling, what we're doing, have some fun and just talk shop with some really interesting people. And speaking of interesting people, we've got a really interesting one for you today. We've got Mr. Will Millard, who has done a great variety of things both in and outside of angling, very famously a year with the tribe, which is what it feels like working with anglers, to be honest, so it can't be that different. So welcome, Will. Welcome to the show. And what have you been doing? What have you been up to at the moment?
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Rob. It's a real pleasure to be on here with you. It's great. What have I been doing? Do you know what? It's been a really, really busy year, which is good. You know, when you work in the freelance media world, you don't like having too many quiet periods, and sort of, I think everyone's kind of been slightly in recovery since COVID. But this year, the big thing that's happened for me in fishing has been I brought out my new book for children, My First Day Fishing, which is very much aimed at encouraging young people to have their first day on the bank. So that's been brilliant. Finally got that out in May. And then, basically been working on another big adult book project as in the background, really. And that's just taken up my whole time. Apart from the small amounts of time that I've been able to dedicate towards going into schools to talk about wildlife, fish, obviously a lot, and do a couple of junior events as well, junior angling events. But in terms of my own fishing, I mean, we were talking before we started recording. It's been very threadbare, mate. I've barely been out this year. Did a bit of piking in the turn of January, and then managed to get out June the 16th, which was just last Sunday, and put a couple of really nice brown trout on the bank, which was beautiful. So I was pleased with that. But we never do enough fishing, do we, Rob?
No, not at all. The one thing I'd say is obviously I follow you on socials, and the most striking picture was you with your family. Yeah, going fishing with kids, getting out there with your family and someone described this to me, and you'll see this on one of our other episodes. Someone described angling as the gateway to the British Isles. And it's not about the fishing, it's about seeing all the beautiful areas of our country that we're fortunate and blessed enough to have. And you've pretty much summed that up completely, and you've summed up why you're such an interesting guest for us, because most of your time and most of your work is about not only, your writing is about connecting with kids, going fishing for the first time, getting into schools. Now that's absolutely key moving forward, not only because it's a great thing for kids to do, but that's going to be key for us as anglers to keep the sport going. So, we'd be really interested to explore a few of those topics and talk about where you're going with that, what the response has been, what you think the barriers might be. So, as far as the book goes, your kids' first day fishing, how has that gone down? Has it sold well? Is it going well? Is it, do you think it's been, do you think it relates to people?
Yeah, I mean, it's been great, actually. It's published through a small children's publisher called Magic Cat, and they're amazing. They're really, really dedicated. They're not anglers themselves, but they really allowed me to take the lead and to really kind of have the space on the page to really go into everything else apart from just kind of the catching fish aspect, really. So there's a load in there about watercraft. There's bits about how I got into fishing. There's obviously a really nice series of pictures with the kind of typical venues that you might go to for the first time, whether it's a canal, a lake, a river, a wild stream. And then we've got really beautifully hand-drawn in that sort of like Crabtree style. Do you remember the old Mr. Crabtree books? Yeah. I sort of wanted to get a bit of a throwback to that, that kind of like traditional hand-drawn style of all the different types of fish that you can catch. So, it's I guess it's and it's done really well. I mean, it's been translated into 11 languages, which is mind-blowing.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing.
I feel like, and I don't know how I feel like in Britain, in the UK at the moment. I mean, we talked about this a little bit before we came on. Like the kind of fishing that I did as a kid, it feels like it's very much in the decline. And I guess in a way, the kind of fishing that I talk about in the book, it is your sort of basic float fishing, rock up, see what you can catch on any day on any given sort of venue.
Hmm.
If I'm being honest, I feel like they've got it more on the European continent than they have in the UK. Like it's not, it's been
Hmm.
really well received by the people that picked it up. But in
Hmm.
places like France, Czech Republic, Germany, they've instantly got it, and the people that are kind of in the publishing market have bought it straight away. Um,
I think we've got to buy
because
that
they do a lot
back
more of that.
into.
They do a lot more of that type of fishing. They do a lot more of that type of fishing that I
Yeah.
probably did when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s. Whereas fishing now, and especially the places where young people look for fishing content, is going to be YouTube and social media and stuff like that. In a way, like actually having a book feels quite. It's a bit of a throwback. It's
It's
very
a throwback in
traditional.
itself.
Uh,
The format.
yeah,
But yeah, you're right.
yeah,
I mean,
exactly. But
even on the competition side of things, international fishing is very much geared towards those traditional methods in traditional ways,
yeah,
and that's why I think even in the UK we struggle with the international competition side of things, because if you look at the members of the England team, there's always the accusation that it can be a bit closed shop, and I don't think it is. I think it's because they are the only people in the country good enough to compete in that type of fishing, because we don't have enough of a grassroots structure in that type of fishing. Um,
yeah, I think
and
you've got a point, and I listen to a lot of sort of the other kind of big match fishing podcasts as well, and it's not something that I've ever done. I'd love to have that opportunity, but a lot of the things that they do talk
mm,
about in terms of like how do you fish sticky mag, how do you
mm,
fish the bolo float,
mm,
like all of these different rods and techniques that are being developed for these
mm.
big continental rivers and wild streams fishing. It feels so foreign to us
Yeah, I
now.
mean, I think
Whereas when I
if you
was
listen to them, you've got to be at the pinnacle of being the best at what we do in the UK, and then they tell you, right, now we know you're the best angler in the UK. Let's completely change how you fish and go learn the
exactly,
European methods. So, I mean, that to me
yeah.
strikes me as like a really obvious barrier there to kind of competition success. And in anything, I know angling's great and wandering down the river's fantastic, but competition always drives growth. On a competition scene, football's competitive, other sports are competitive. If we had a competitive scene, we could bring juniors through that isn't, when you get to the end of it, change it all completely. That's probably going to drive more into juniors as well. But I mean, harkening back to what you've been doing in your book, I mean, I've read it. It's absolutely fantastic. It really has got that retro Crabtree
Oh,
feel.
thank
But I feel like we all love Mr. Crabtree. We all have a bit of passion for angling. We all love, the Miller rod license pictures. They all kind of harken back to what we grew up with, catching a perch and a roach and,
you.
all these kind of things. But I think what we need to talk about and kind of challenge, and what I'll ask your opinion on next, if you don't mind, is, there's whole generations of people right now, kids growing up that don't have that feel. They haven't got those memories, because what you're doing is eliciting memories that people don't have. For me, that's very emotional. For a lot of our audience, that's going to be really kind of, how they grew up and they remember those canals and catching those perch. But how do we inspire the kids that have never had that to feel the same way about it? And what you're doing, going into schools, and obviously I know there's a lot more to fishing with that, but, including fishing in the environment is a fantastic way to get people engaged. And the one thing I would say, and I'll ask your opinion on this, you obviously mentioned that it's less about the fishing and more about the environment and getting kids involved in water and things like that. Now, in a way, for me, that's quite sad, because I'm in love with the fishing. You love fishing. The fishing should sell itself, but I honestly believe it's not going to. And as I said, using the fishing as a gateway to the British Isles and what we have on offer is key. And is that something you kind of believe? Is it something you're consciously aiming for, and think that that's probably a route to keeping fishing going?
I think that, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about in what you've just said. I think just to sort of take it back to one of the things that you said at the start, um, yeah, with the book, you obviously we can look at it and you get that sort of throwback feel, and you're like, oh yeah, Crabtree, but for children that obviously haven't had that, as you've mentioned, they're not going to make that connection. But there is still definitely something in that and in the romance that you can still tap into. So obviously one of the things is obviously I've written this book, but in terms of like igniting the kids and the young people and getting them to understand what that means and how that feels and how it felt to us, that is a tactile idea. That takes getting bums on the banks and getting them out there and getting them to get it. Slight tangent here. I remember reading an interview with the great Sir David Attenborough in which a journalist asked him, how did you first get into animals? And he just turned around and said, well, I don't recall a point when I was never not into animals. Like, I was born with this interest in animals. And I think the same's true. I've never met a kid who isn't interested in fish, ever. It's never happened. Whenever I've gone into a school and I've brought tanks in to show them, and that's what you have to do. You have to physically bring them the waterway and put it in front of them. I've never seen them not be transfixed. What's missing is there's this kind of assumption that, and I think it's an adult assumption. I think that adults, unfortunately my generation, have come through and they've departed that sort of rich, romantic, I'm just going to get a rod, sit down and give it a go idea and be surrounded by the wild. Things have become too preoccupied with waterways being dangerous, waterways being largely inaccessible. You know, there's a lot of places that are now behind fences, or there's big signs going up warning you of the dangers and telling you not to go there in case, you know, you're going to end up breaking some law. We have a real problem. There's a real gap in education in the UK right now in terms of wildlife education. So much of the way that our educational system is built is all about trying to get children to pass these academic tests that are going to then get them to take the next stage in their working life, and there's not enough done to really get them outside and to teach them about the great outdoors and
it could be questioned that
we
you know
as kids,
you could honestly question that it's not even successful in its own aim. You know, this kind of really academic structure of teaching functional or kind of factual things to kids doesn't seem to really be giving them the greatest platform in the real world anyway. You know, in inverted commas, because there's no experience.
Don't get me onto that. Exactly, Rob. I mean, don't get me onto that. But like, I mean, the one thing I will say in sum is that all it actually does is facilitate the success of one particular specific type of learner that's able to sit down in that classroom environment and learn those things. I don't remember anything from my history GCSE, but I remember sitting down with my granddad when I was 4 years old and catching my first fish and how that worked.
Yeah,
for me, I learned in the outdoors. And I just feel like when you take the outdoors into schools, you've got a much better chance of engaging them and making them realise how great it is. And you've sort of won half the battle. And then it's only an easy step to then get them to turn up to a
I mean, they go home
day.
dying then, begging parents to take them, you know.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we had a really successful junior day here in May, I think it was, with the Morgan Anglers Club. And one of the guys that was running it, he went through the schools. I used my social media networks, and it was all about how cool are fish, you know, and we're going to help you access this magical world. And we had an amazing turnout. In fact, we were having to do it in sort of like 2-hour shuttles because there were so many kids. We didn't have enough people on the banks to actually manage it safely. But it was brilliant, and everybody walked away having caught a fish, and everybody walked away having got it. But then the next challenge is, how do you then keep that going? You know, how do you then get them to take the next step where they are coming back to the sport again and again and again, and are going on that learning journey that you and I both went on as kids. And that can be tricky, and that takes a lot from clubs. It takes a lot of effort from people who are willing to volunteer their time for free quite often. And also it takes energy from parents who might not know anything about fishing to be like, right, I'm going to buy them this gear. I'm going to make an investment when you might not have much money. I'm going to get them the club book, and I'm going to get them down and get them involved. And you need to have good junior sections within clubs as well to make sure that journey can happen as well. So, you know, it's not easy. There's lots of challenges, but if we don't do something about it now, we are going to have a real issue with recruitment that we're in the next 10 years, 20 years, we're going to realise we've got a major problem on our hands.
I agree 100% with everything you've just said, and I think it's probably highlights even more, and I haven't thought about this directly enough, and it's something we're really keen on at Clubmates, connecting clubs and fisheries to increase participation in fishing with kids. It's all about connection, it's not about whether kids want to fish, it's getting to the stage that they even realise they want to fish. It's more about, as you've said, and I've done the same thing, if you can put a whip in a kid's hand and catch them a little roach or a little perch or a rudd, everyone loves it. I've never ever met a single kid that does not love doing that. And the parents, most of the time, end up kind of trying to get the whip out the mum's hand. Because when you finally you say, you tell the parents, I'll give it a go. They're quite squeamish about the thought of it, but you say, oh no, give it a go while you're here with the kids, and you turn around next minute and the mum's doing all the fishing, and is absolutely in love with it. And I've never found a single person that does not enjoy going to catch their first fish. And I think you've really captured that really well in what you've written and what you're doing. But as you've just said, it seems to be about connecting people to that world. And beyond that, we've kind of got these little points where maybe you can show them the world, then you've got to get them to the world, and then you've got to keep them in the world. And what we're responsible for, people such as yourself and, businesses such as ours, when we're kind of, we've got the reach to speak to a lot of anglers, what we're responsible for are the connections between those things. So how do we get them from seeing the world to being in the world? So how do we bridge that gap? And then how do we bridge the next gap of keeping them in it? Now, there are some fantastic projects going on around the country, and I'm sure you take part in a lot of them, you see a lot of them. There are some great, projects going on with the Angling Trust Get Fishing and with the Canal and Rivers Trust and individual clubs and fisheries. But we can't rest on our laurels with that, and I think you'll agree, it's easy to put on an open day. We can all get some whips and we can all get some maggots and go down a canal or go to a little pond and catch fish, and we all feel really good about it, as we should. And, I do it at my own club, we volunteer our time, and we should feel good about it because it's the right thing to do, but then we let them go away, and then they don't come back again. So you need to kind of think beyond that, and you've just touched on it, into kind of what is an ongoing participation scheme, and how can we make it affordable until they're an adult, until they're earning. And I think the best clubs and most of the clubs out there have now removed that barrier in terms of offering free junior access, free membership. It's really not hard, and I know this is one I always advocate for in the podcast and to clubs at Clubmate. Approach the tackle shops, approach the manufacturers. They all would love to help junior fishing, because at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do, but they're also future customers. So they'll give you some free kit or a discount or help you out with the kit for these kids. So just ask. The worst that they can say is no. Moving on from there, Will, what's the new book about? What's the next book going to be about? What's the adult book going to be about? What are you writing about our fishing?
Oh, man. I'm not sure. This is a Clubmate exclusive. I'm not even sure.
Clubmate exclusive.
Even allowed to
don't get yourself in trouble. Don't get yourself in trouble.
Don't get yourself in trouble. It's not a fishing book, actually. A lot of the books that I write, I write a lot about fishing, but I guess the thing that connects all of them are people in natural and wild spaces. So the next book I'm co-writing with a wildlife cameraman who's been all over the world, filmed some unbelievable things for the BBC. He's worked on all of the big blue chip series that you could think of, Planet Earth, Big Cat Diary. He's a
good resume.
Absolute legend. But he's never written a book, and I sort of sat down with him and we started plotting out his life. And do you know what? I'm not just crowbarring this in, but it's interesting, to talk about those formative experiences as kids. I thought that we were going to be sitting down and writing a book about, a jolly romp around the world's wild places, as we kept saying to each other. But the book we've ended up writing is actually about his childhood. And it's all about those kind of early experiences with wildlife that kind of formed the sparks that ended up leading him by the hand to go and have this remarkable career, and the things that really made him who he is. it's been a real privilege. It's tough. We're getting towards the back end of it now. First draft's due in a few weeks, so I've got to pull my finger out and get it over the line. But I'm excited about that one. It should be coming out in the spring. I've also got two children's books coming out, more children's books coming out in October, and then another one in the spring. One is about beavers. It's called The Beaver That Saved Christmas, which is fun. And
sounds fun.
The next one is about a red squirrel in an urban park. But both books have got these sort of messages really about what we can do as people to kind of understand the environment and how best we can modify our behaviours to help fix some of the problems of our own making. Getting back to rivers and fishing. I mean, that's definitely something that's been very big in terms of what I've done over the last few years. It's been talking about, the things that we can all do as people and as individuals to try and help, especially river systems, to try and, I mean, it's very doubtful you're going to get them back to the former glories of what I recall growing up, but we could certainly do a lot better. And in both those children's books, the kind of running theme is that it's not about this individual animal, it's about the place that it lives in. And if you can lift the place that it lives in, you're going to make the environment better for all of the animal species. And, I feel like one of the things that can happen with anglers is we can focus too much on our fishing and the fish that we want to catch. And sometimes we do forget about, well, to catch that fish, it needs to be living in an environment where all of the component parts are present and correct. It needs clean water to live in. It needs a habitat to feed off. It needs appropriate levels of predation for a shoal to be healthy, but it can't tip too far the other way. And obviously, we need to get a grip of a lot of the pollution problems that we have, all of those things really. So I guess a lot of what I've been working on in recent years has been about kind of looking at ecosystems as a whole, and when it comes to rivers, trying to understand them as these big kind of organic living masses just in themselves, where a river just isn't the place where our fish is. It's like this massive living thing, and if you damage one thing on the kind of smallest tendril root of this reaching tree, then you end up damaging the whole river system in itself. So a lot of my work's been around that, and whether I'm writing for children or whether I'm writing for adults, that's a consistent theme, alongside getting to work with people like this wildlife cameraman, and then in the past I worked with a hermit a couple of years ago and managed to get his book. These people that spend their entire lives just in the wild, basically, and they're all saying the same things, at the end of the day.
The problems are all the same. I think I think angling has been guilty of being quite insular and, stuck in its own environment, but we're all actually in the same environment. And as you say, these rivers and lakes and streams, they're massive, moving, living things. And I don't think people realise the impact. And I don't think they realise, and we're guilty as anglers, I think, of not selling ourselves enough as being invested in that ecosystem. And while there's a lot of things for us to do, I would also say at the same time that we haven't sold enough what we do. I don't think we sell ourselves enough as to the habitat projects and the litter picking and, all these kind of things. And I've got to say, I can see why you don't get to go fishing much, because it sounds like you're incredibly busy. But, we're really grateful for people. We're really grateful for people like you that are doing those things and talking about these things, because there's not enough of that. There's not enough of that talk. And everything we can do to talk about not only rivers, but the outdoor environment, and use it as a platform for educating the future generations is absolutely fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to that book. The book about your wild cameraman. I mean, this sounds fantastic. A guy with that kind of resume, and obviously you've brought the skills there to be able to translate that into the written word. So I must admit, I'm really looking forward to that one, and then to hear about the 3 more books following that one up. I can see why you don't get to fish very much, but hopefully we can have some more time soon. This episode of the Casting Forward podcast is brought to you by Clubmate, the all-in-one management platform for clubs and fisheries. So, kind of harkening back to the fishing side of things, because honestly, I could talk about the outdoors forever, and I'm sure you could. But kind of bringing it back to the purpose of the podcast, obviously, Clubmate, we've got a lot of clubs and fisheries that we provide software for, and we're all about, helping clubs modernise and their modern methods. I think it's really obvious that that's been a problem with clubs and fisheries, and that it's going to be a barrier, and that the world's changed an awful lot. So where do you think we sit? Because having spoken about the kids, it's okay to say that we're going to get them on that journey, but what's at the end of it? When we reach the end of that journey, what's your current take on, the clubs and fisheries when it comes to rivers, and obviously the commercial side of things? We'll get your take on where fishing's at in general. So do you have any ideas? And let us know where you've been fishing, and kind of give us an idea about your club, because, people are always influenced by that, local to them.
Well, I'm really lucky. I fish predominantly in the waters of two clubs, both of which Clubmate clubs. I should point out.
So they should be. Congratulations.
So they should be. Which is Glamorgan Anglers Club, who are well, they're both brilliant. They've been, and Merthyr Tynfil Angling Alliance, both fantastic clubs, both very different. They do different things for me and my fishing. So for Glamorgan, I get to fish the River Taff, which is a river that I've fished.
Yeah, great river.
Consistently the entire time I've been living in Wales. I've moved down to the coast now, and we've got, if I want to just go out and take a loaf of bread and catch some carp off the surface, there's a couple of ponds, 5 minutes drive, which is just amazing, just to be able to kind of go down and even just have an hour just to be able to do that. And then Glamorgan also have some really good, fun, well-stocked ponds where you can go and get your string pulled. And there's always a chance of something really special. They've got some really big perch in some of their waters. And then obviously the Taff, you've got the outside chance of catching a really big barbel. They're few and far between, but the fish that are in there are big. It's probably one of your best chances of getting a double in this area. Like the Y, which is also, we have a stretch in our ticket, but quite difficult to catch a double figure barbel up there, I find. I've had loads of nines, and that sort of stamp between 6 and 8. You'll go there and catch a hatful. Whereas in the Taff, you have to put the hours in. But if you get one, then it's going
to be a good one.
Merthyr Tynfil Angling Alliance, predominantly for me, it's about my predator angling. So I fish Ponsticketh Reservoir through pretty much the entire winter for pike, and that is my place of peace. I will go there. There's no phone signal. I can get in amongst the trees. Me and my mates have got a little pike club that we fish together in. We have a little sort of competition for a little pike shield that I've found in a charity shop for who can catch the biggest fish in the winter. It's great, man. Yeah, exactly.
And we'll basically, who's the one that was set out in the cold the longest?
Pretty much.
Who wants to get the coldest?
Exactly, and there's some really quality pike up there, which is great, and we're incredibly lucky here in Wales. In terms of the mix of fishing that we can do. I see fish on the coast now. I didn't really used to do that before, but I've started since I've moved down here, and it's great. We've got good river fishing. We've got the Taff, the Y, the Usk. We've got great trout fishing, and we've got some fantastic ponds and lakes as well. So, really blessed. On June the 16th, just gone this week, I got up at 4 a.m. and fished the Taff in the morning and had a couple of really nice brown trout. I then went and had a picnic with my family on an area of rocks called the Bendricks and put out two shore rods as well, and had to go there. We then went to Barry Island and went on the roller coasters. And if I wasn't so tired, and if the football hadn't been on, I probably would have nipped down to Barry Puddle for a loaf of bread and caught a carp. And I thought afterwards, I was like, in terms of 10 minutes drive in either direction, to be able to have that amount of species to go at, I think
we all lose touch, and I think this is what some of your work is absolutely great in doing, is we all lose touch with how fortunate we are. I'm lucky in my area of the country, which, to be fair, is in quite a small world, isn't far away from your area of the country, where you grew up. I can drive 10 minutes in any direction and I can catch carp, barbel, trout, pike, perch, and nearly every species in the British Isles within a short drive of my house. And I think we've all lost touch with that. And I think to a certain extent, we're guilty of not even telling kids that. Kids don't even know because they're surrounded by buildings and structure and,
Yeah,
infrastructure, and
exactly.
I think they can't even see it anymore. And I think our responsibility as the kind of mature generation now is to show them it. Take them out there before we're gone. Before the sport is gone, and before some of these issues overwhelm us, and not only before it disappears, because that sounds quite negative, but so that we can have more of those kids to help fix that future for us. These are the future generations that are going to run angling and participate and campaign for the environment and really invest and be stakeholders in that environment. So it can, it's clear from this conversation that it's important to you as an angler, it's important to your family and your life and your professional life, and fishing and the environment are clearly absolutely key to you as a person, and I think you can obviously see
Yeah,
the
they
value in
are.
that to other people.
I think as well. I mean, like, just to add to what you were saying, Rob, and I think you've really hit on a really key point. We have got a lot of problems. We've got a lot of problems in fishing. We've got a lot of problem with our rivers. But it's really important that we, as anglers, as you've already said, make sure that we do say about what we do have and about how great
Mm.
it is. That Taff, that section of the River Taff that I was fishing, you could have catapulted a stone and hit one of the city bridges. We are talking the absolute edge of the capital city of Wales, and
Yeah.
I'm catching these stunning fish and seeing all of these other great wildlife. I saw a fox come out of its den. I saw dippers, kingfishers. Um, I saw a beautiful heron sat in a tree for a couple of hours with me. Like, all of these
Mm.
amazing things on the edge of the
Mm.
city. Whereas most people, they'll walk along the banks of the River Taff, they'll walk on the Taff Trail, they'll be looking at their phones, they won't look at the water. And I think that one of the issues that we've got is, as much as it's really important, we need to keep speaking and hammering those people in charge over the state of our rivers. We don't want to overdo it and put in the public mind, the wider consciousness of people, that our rivers are all destitute and dead and just
Mm.
wasteland full of pollution. That there's
Still
nothing
sell the
in
good
there that's
stuff,
worth.
still sell. There is so much out there,
Exactly.
life. There is still so much life out there, and we're the custodians of making sure that remains. But let's not just pretend they're all gone already. And
No.
as someone told me, we're one of the only groups of people that are there for any period of time. As you say, people are fleeting. They bike down or they drive down, or they're on the phone. Now we sit there, unfortunately, for hours,
Yeah,
days. Oh God,
exactly.
but we sit there
Yeah.
for hours and days, and you're just watching this ongoing live film. You're just watching this nature pass you by, and kingfishers and herons and otters. There's loads going on, and we are lucky enough and blessed as a sport that the rods are just only one aspect of that, and the fish are only just one aspect. And it's like someone's making a brand new film for you every time you're sat on the bank. It's like having your very own director making a film that only ever
Absolutely.
gets more beautiful as the day goes on. So I think you sum that up really well. I think you sum that up really well, and I think it's easy to go down that route of just talking about problems, but the way that you're kind of selling the fact that there's still so much beauty out there is very important. We've got some, if you're going to try and sell someone something, don't just tell them it's broken. Don't say, I'll tell you what, let's get you into fishing because it's all broken. But to still highlight the really good things and why we need to stop the bad things. I think is key, and I think you're one of the best people for that. I think you've obviously done a lot for that. One thing I'm really interested in is obviously your work actually going into schools. Can you just help our audience out a little bit and kind of tell us what that looks like, what the response is, what you actually do when you're there, and perhaps how people can actually get you into a school? How can someone get you to go into a school?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rob. No, I mean, do you know what? It's been difficult. This time last year, I thought, this is something I really want to do a lot more of. I'd already done a lot of sort of schools engagement work, but it wasn't something that I felt was something that I did with real regularity, where I was like, no, this is a part of who I am, and this is a part of what I do. And last year, I decided that I was going to do that. Um, and to be honest with you, straight off the bat, I was like, right, well, you need to have a really good, show, So I do two things really. I do an Ask the Explorer workshop where I talk all about a lot of my expeditions and the indigenous peoples that I've lived with and met. But I bring in everything with me. So it's my jungle hammocks, my pack rafts, and also all of the things that I've been given by all of those indigenous peoples that I've lived and worked with over the years. But I also bring in as many animals as I can as well, as much stuff as I can sort of ethically and safely bring in that can really engage the kids. And and that has always done really well. For years and years I toured that around schools, and then I was like, how can I bring in the fish? How can I bring in the fishing? So I ended up just building entirely new workshop, which is based entirely around freshwater ecosystems and fishing. And basically what I decided I would do was I would effectively, they learn about the food chain, but they don't really understand what that is because they've never really seen it. So what I'll do is I'll go into a school and I'll start off with bloodworm, invertebrates, microorganisms, all in this kind of big jar of sludge. And then I'll build up gently through the food chain, to the very kind of smallest fish, right the way through to your big sort of native freshwater species. And then depending on whether I can do it or not, I usually bring in a few of my big sort of like Amazon catfish as well, just to throw those into the mix. And kids love it. They absolutely love it. It blows their minds. And it really kind of brings out how the kind of freshwater ecosystem works. And then they're excited about it. So, yeah, initially when I started doing it this time last year, really as a sort of formal thing, or the beginning of last year rather, I thought, how can I make sure that I'm able to cover my costs, but also make this as cheap as possible for schools? And I looked into getting funding, and to be honest with you, very sadly, it just turned out to be more effort than it was worth. But the one thing that I would say is that, the schools have to sort of levy the cost of it. So they get in touch with me directly. I do it as cheap as I possibly can. And then we make a booking direct sort of through my website or through my social media or through my email. And I go in and do it. But what I'd really like to do is to be able to find some way of covering my costs, whether it's over here in Wales, we've got Natural Resources Wales, which is our equivalent of the Environment Agency, whether there was a way of getting them on board to get some funding to make it more formal. And to be honest with you, getting a few other people involved to be able to go in and do these talks as well, because a lot of the time I'm having to turn down schools because I'm so busy with all my other work.
Yeah.
Which is, the sort of big bill paying work. I'm not able to do as much as I can in the schools, but I've just sadly come up short with that really. And the fishing clubs have been amazing. Like they've offered us help. They've offered us venues. Like I've gone in and done it at one of the fishing clubs, the Morgan Anglers, where I've been able to do a bit of it and bring the fish in and show the kids on our fishing days. And, the children have always really, really loved it. But in terms of like reaching out and actually getting that kind of like formal statutory educational board on board, where they will give you something to really kind of go in there and make it happen, it just hasn't been able to happen. So it's always been individual schools. And that makes me feel a bit sad because I've done a lot for free, but you do get to a point where you're like, there's only so much that I can actually reasonably do.
Life gets in the way, we've all got to eat, we've all got to feed ourselves, as passionate as we are. And I'd like to think we're all angels.
Exactly.
You've got to you've got to pay the bills and put food on the table and look after your own family. It is sad because I've never seen or heard anything as admirable to represent the environment and what we do, to really tie fishing into that for a very long time. I would love to have a conversation where we investigate how we could help with that. We've obviously got a lot of connections with clubs and fisheries, and then obviously schools and people involved in clubs and fisheries. I'd love to help you out there, and we'll have a conversation about that because
that would be amazing. But it does frustrate me a little bit. Like the Welsh government have come in, and then they've got like 4 pillars for education going forward, speaking generally. And one of them is like children need to be having authentic experiences within the classroom, going and doing the things that we're talking about. And I'm like, that's brilliant. But you're putting the onus on the schools to fund that. What are you going to do to put the money in place so that people like me, like yourselves as well, the Angling Trust are starting to deliver schools projects, but they can't come over here because we're NRW and they're getting their money like from the environment. It's really frustrating. And
they make it hard to do a good job, don't they?
Yeah, and I want to see more formal investment from local education authorities, from the governments, from the councils into getting people in to be able to give those children the authentic experiences that are really going to make them understand about the environment all around them, you know. But yeah, I'd love to have that conversation.
Oh, we'd love to help out with that. That's what we're all about. You know, we're in this business not only for for us to make money, but we're in it to help angling. You know, we're in it because we're passionate, and it's one of the best things I've seen in years. You know, it's so passionate, and your passion comes across really well on camera. And it's we could both talk forever, I think, but. Yeah, no, we'll have another conversation about that. But I suppose we better kind of cycle back around and kind of draw some conclusions. Let's talk about your fishing again to finish off with. We've just talked about all the reasons you're not going to be fishing very much.
We haven't talked enough about fishing, have we?
Yeah. No, there's not enough fishing in here. But what are you going to do? When are you going to go? And what are you going to catch? What is your next aim for fishing yourself, your personal fishing?
Right. So once I've got this next book over the line, so I'm literally hanging on now. I'm like, I've got 3 more weeks left, grafting really hard. As soon as that's done, I'm thinking, right, August, September, October. I love that time of year. I particularly like the last week in September and the first week in October. Don't know why, it's always been fun.
Clock change time nearly, isn't it? So you're kind of getting towards the end of the light kind of thing.
And I think the fish know, the autumn's coming and they get down on the feed. And that's when you can really, really, make hay whilst the last of the sun shines. So for me, I'm going to be going to France for 3 weeks in the last week of July. We're going back to the Loire Valley. We stayed in this tiny little gîte in the middle of rural France last summer. And it's amazing. And there's basically this beautiful canal that then comes round into a river called the Cher. And you have to get this. There's a lot of red tape in France, but eventually I worked out how to get a permit.
They'll let you fish eventually.
So I'll be fishing that canal, and I'll be fishing the wild river, and they've got basically wild river carp. I'd love to be able to get one of those on the bank. They've got big chub. They've got some really beautiful silverfish, and it's just France is over double the size of the UK, and they've got the same amount of population. So I mean, in terms of like those opportunities to go and not see another angler and do proper immersive backpack on your back, one rod, go into the wilds and have that experience, it's a really, really amazing place to be able to go. And I'd encourage people that are thinking about going to France, go over there and fish the big French lakes for your big carp, but don't forget about those wild river systems because it's incredible fishing. So I'll be doing that. Then I'm coming back. I'm going to go to Ashmead for the first time. I think I've got 3 or 4 days booked through Carp Society. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I don't really do much big sort of carp fishing, but it looks like my kind of venue, down in the Somerset levels, properly wild, and there's some really quality fish. It'd be nice to be able to just go down there and just fish for a few days. Big target as well is I've got to try and catch a big bass this summer. That's way high up on the list. So I'm going to be getting the lures out, going down Gower, going down Pembrokeshire and putting a real concerted effort in to do that. I'd like to catch a big barbel on the Taff. I say it every year. I never put enough time in. I talked about it at the start of this podcast. I've not actually even done it. I've tried, but I've failed. And I'd like to be able to do that. Yeah, and then obviously we'll be ticking round to the predator season coming into the winter, and I've not actually banked a 20-pounder out of Pond Stickett, and there's plenty of them in there. This big Welsh reservoir off the edge of the Brecon Beacons. I've had plenty of high teens, but I've not had a 20 yet, and I'd really like to make that happen this year, and maybe get my name on our pike shield for once, as opposed to constantly.
Yeah, go win that cup
at the end of every season. Yeah, I mean, those are the things.
Talk about so much fishing, so little time there, kind of thing. I mean, having spoken about how you have so little time to go fishing, those are some bold targets, but also some really exciting ventures there. So I hope you do get round to all of them, and you deserve to. I hope you hit some of those targets. So just to draw a kind of close to the podcast, can you have just as a quick fire thing, you tell me what you think are the top 3 things you want to do to make fishing better? We've covered some of them. We've spoken about them at length. If you could fire off 3 things right now that is going to get fishing out there to kids, and I'll let you go.
Access. Making sure that children, through these brilliant things like Clubmate, are able to easily access as many waters as they can local to them. education, getting into schools, continuing to do much more work with children, direct engagement, literally showing them the fish that we have in a tank if needs be, so that they can see how amazing it is and make that connection between what's in that tank and what is literally in the river right outside their school. Making them realise that magic, pulling back that watery curtain a little bit for them, and then teaching them how to go out there and catch it for themselves. Those are the first two big things. Probably for me, the third thing would just be continue to be as positive as possible about our sport. Don't get mired down in all of the various factions and politics that we have within our sport, and all of the different angling bodies and all of the kind of like quite selfish behaviours sometimes that you see within angling. Just continue to be really positive, build as many bridges within our angling community as I possibly can, because you know what, there are so many great clubs out there and great people doing amazing work, and the more that we can do to bring those people in under this broad umbrella of looking forward to try and secure the future of our sport, the better it's going to be. There's so many of those people out there, and as many people as we can bring together that share the same aims and ambitions as we've really got a very, very good chance at making the future of fishing much more positive in the UK.
Nice one, Will. That's absolutely fantastic. I would agree with you 100%. That's one of the reasons we're on this podcast, is to really connect with anglers, get more people fishing. Just to finish off, how can people get hold of you? If people want to find Will Millard and see some of the great things you do, how can they contact you?
Thanks, mate. Well, I'm on all of the major social media, but not TikTok yet. I still haven't figured that one out. So I've got Facebook
getting too old for this.
I know, I'm getting too old. This kid said to me after one of the fish workshops, like, "What's your TikTok?" And I said I didn't have one, and he looked at me like I just told him that I didn't have a head. He was like, "That is mad. How do you not have TikTok?" So I've got Facebook. If you just search for Will Millard, you'll find me. I've got Twitter, which is @MillardWill. I'm on Instagram as well. So you can search me on there. My website is willmillard.com, and you can find my email address there. Please get in touch. I'd love to come to your school if it's something that you think sounds good for your area. And then obviously, if you can support me through buying a book, then I hugely appreciate that too. Thanks, Rob. I've absolutely loved it, mate.
It's been great.
You, buddy.
Hopefully, we discussed before the podcast, we're going to get out fishing sometime this year, so we'll try and squeeze it into everything else. But I'd love to get out in the bank and talk about these things some more. So we'll let you go. If anyone wants to get hold of Will, get hold of him via the methods he's just told you, or drop it into the comments and we'll get hold of Will for you, because we'd love to help you. I'd love to help some of our clubmate clubs and anyone that's really interested. So thanks very much for your time, Will. We'll sign off there, and we will see you on the next episode of the Casting Forward podcast, guys. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening. Join us next time for another exciting episode of the Casting Forward podcast, brought to you by Clubmate.